How's it going, everybody? Thanks for joining us today. I'm Andy Meyer. I am from Code 42. For those of you who do not know what Code 42 is or what we do, we are a data protection company. We have traditionally focused on helping customers back up and recover their data. And we've been recently expanding into more data visibility protection, making sure that we can let you know when your data, your intellectual property assets are threatened, and be able to audit on any sort of incident around exfiltration, leak, anything like that. And then this is Alan Foley from Anaplan.
Hi, my name's Alan Foley, Global Head of IT at Anaplan. My team oversees everything from Jamf server to 365, all the devices we have in our environment, and including all the infrastructure as well. Some stuff in AWS, but we oversee basically everything that's on the back end that supports all of our sales staff and people across the globe.
Excellent, excellent. Now, Alan, can you tell us a little bit about what does Anaplan do? I'm just curious for those who aren't in the know.
Yeah, so Anaplan is a San Francisco-based company. We're SaaS, so we're all in the cloud. We compete with the likes of like Oracle, IBM in the planning space. So essentially what you have is you have a very malleable platform that we can build any type of application that will help you plan with data coming from Salesforce, coming from Oracle, coming from SAP through an ETL. And we're able to quickly manage that for you and can pivot and provide really valuable insight. Probably the coolest part of it, and which is why I joined the company 4 years ago, is seeing that and seeing how fast you could change like your entire sales territory and go in seconds for what used to take people days, weeks, or sometimes months, depending on how big your sales organization is. So seeing the power of the software and the cloud, it just brought me right into Anaplan and brought me to the company.
Awesome. No, that's great to know. What was your background before you'd come to Anaplan?
Yeah, I spent about 15 years in traditional IT. So in the data center, Cisco, Microsoft, SharePoint, Exchange, kind of the whole mix. Very Windows-centric world, but also very traditional. Also service providers. So I was always part of the team that was like the experts, and so I kind of came up learning from the best people in Twin Cities. I was very, very fortunate, and I learned a ton of stuff. But I always did the consulting engagements where it was kind of like they looked to us for the expertise, and not only did we kind of provide the expertise, like how you should kind of direct your business and which way you should go, but also from a technical standpoint, what's the best technical solution out there? And coming from a world where Mac was not kind of part of that discussion, it was very interesting going to a SaaS company based in the Silicon Valley.
Yeah, no, that sounds like Anaplan's been growing like crazy. I know you guys just IPO'd. You know, it's really fascinating. It sounds like the company was a lot smaller when you first joined up. What was that like coming in? What was your first day at Anaplan like?
Yeah, so 2014, I think we were just over 200 people at the time globally. I joined the office here in Minneapolis. I think I was employee like 10 or 11. We didn't have a fridge. We didn't have a microwave. It was very like walk in and like, oh wow, this is my new job. But getting to travel the world and meet people in different cultures and different locations, it's been very eye-opening. A lot of things that you just don't expect. Maybe having like worked in the same area or even in the U.S. your whole life, getting to deal with people in different countries and understanding like where they're coming from, like the privacy restrictions in the EU. A lot of stuff starts to make sense when you start working with people in those other geographies. That was very, very enlightening. And now we're to the point where we've got over 1,200 people in like 20 offices, and we just recently went through our IPO a couple weeks ago, and it's really full steam ahead at this point.
Absolutely. So you guys are 1,200 people now?
Mm-hmm. Yep, 1,200 employees.
And how many were there when you first started?
About 200.
200.
Yep.
So that's some very big scaling you guys did over the last 4 years. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about how you did that? You guys were a Mac first shop, so like how'd you make that work?
Yeah, so we were very fortunate in the fact that kind of set from the top down, from the C levels, we're an Apple shop. And I thought, oh, okay. So it's almost the exact opposite problem a lot of people have is like, oh, we want to have a choice program and introduce Apple into our environment. I had the opposite issue. I had people wanting a Windows machine because like, oh, I'm a developer, I really need Windows, and I use this IDE, and we're like, okay, if you create a business case, we'd provide it and we'd make it happen. But we're still to this day 80-90% Mac, and between the Apple ecosystem, using things like VPP, DEP, Jamf, Code 42, all these different platforms. We were able to scale globally and very easily. Well, not as hard as it could have been.
Yeah.
It was still very, very hard work. But we were able to really get those economies of scale and use the products as they were built and intended. So really kind of using the automation and those programs. We always kind of think globally but act locally. So knowing, like, hey, I don't have a resource in every single office. I need to make sure that I can get a Mac to this person in a Romanian development shop. And it gets there, and it automatically enrolls. All the policies come down. The software gets installed. I mean, that stuff wouldn't be possible 5-10 years ago. And that's really how we did it. Is we used a lot of the things that everyone's talking about here, the other different sessions. We use these technologies to help make it possible.
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. You mentioned your resource constraint. How many IT people do you have? You mentioned you can't have everyone at every site. How many sites do you have, and how many IT people will actually support that business?
So we have 20 offices where we staff employees. We have about 6 of those offices that actually have people in them, IT staff.
Okay.
The rest of us are kind of back end in some of the other offices, but we don't have a local hands and presence in each office. So we use the policies in Jamf to write stuff, write to logs, pull those logs up, and kind of understand what's going on. Then sometimes we have to remote in stuff like that. But yeah, we really still don't to this day have a local presence in all those locations.
That's actually really cool to hear, and that's fascinating. I'm curious. You mentioned some of the policies and things that you've been doing with Jamf to help really speed up your processes and handle these remote users. What are some of the challenges that you faced with that, and how is Jamf and how's the stack that we built out with you? How's that working for you, and how is that helping you solve those challenges?
Yeah, I'd say that probably the first thing that we look for when we're going down the route is like, how can we manage all these devices, and how can we make sure that we get all of our policies and everything out to those computers. And when we rolled out Jamf, building out things like groups and sites and locations, those types of things helped just tremendously. Where there is a nuance where you've got to have a different policy for a different team, or hey, these are the guys that have access to the code. Higher security constraints. We're going to lock down the firewall. We're going to make sure that they can only put in stuff from the App Store. Things like that. We're able to really do that really well. But software is really critical in that. The software is the network, and the software is the environment, as we've been talking about.
Yeah.
It's been very useful to have a very functional utility where you can get as granular as you need to, based on the attributes in your environment.
No, that's always great to hear. Another question for you is. We talked about it, and you came in, there was, very small IT staff when you came in.
I was the first employee,
so
one. There actually was no IT when I started. It was a woman who became office manager, and then an executive assistant to the CEO, and she had an Amex. And so she would go, oh, we need email, swipe. We need a website, swipe. So when I came in, there was nothing. It was absolutely astounding. So coming from a service provider background, where we built like a Fortune 1000 type IT environment and then put customers onto that. So very strict, very policy driven, very corporate-y, walking into an environment where they said, oh, hey, this is what we need you to do. We need you to do a new phone system, new email, new this, new that, figure out how Apple's going to work, all these different things. And I kind of walked in and I was like, wait, we don't have a password policy. We don't have laptops being backed up. And I'm like, where are the servers? It was really, really eye-opening. But you can get really far today with a credit card. And you also don't have to really know what you're doing, which is kind of the beauty of software, right? But it's also the detriment. We had a lot of different systems in place that people were purchasing, especially as different business leaders had their own credit cards. They were swiping them, and so the number of times that we consolidated different accounts from different business units was really mind-blowing. We weren't getting the better discounts by kind of consolidating under a single contract. Yeah. We find that a lot because the silos were doing their own things. With the lack of IT and no governance, that's just kind of how it happened.
Yeah, no, that's you mentioned that your first thing you came in, they gave you all these objectives, and but there was no password policy. What was the first thing you actually, like what was your first project coming on? And then what's the first project you got done?
Let's see, the first project, well, so it really wasn't it was literally a list. So this is what we want you to do in the first 60 days.
Oh, wow.
And I looked at that list and I thought, wow, I mean, I've done like dozens and dozens of email migrations and things over the years, so it was no shock what that list was. But seeing what that whole list was, and I thought, wow, this is a ton of stuff. And you know, I come from a background, well, let's talk to the business. What does the business need? Because it isn't just what does IT want to do, it's how can we help the business, right? And if you don't do that, you're not going to succeed. So the first thing I did was like try to meet with everybody that I could, and I said, hey, you know, I come from this background, this is where I'm from, but you know, I'm new here. How can we help you, and how can we help the business? And it really turned out that the people were kind of shocked that there wasn't that they were going to have a partner. And have someone come in and join them and try to make their lives easier, reduce friction, all those things that IT should be doing. It was very, very interesting. But yeah, one of the first things that I did was I was like, okay, I need to manage 200 Macs globally. How am I going to do this? Like, I don't know of a way. And so I met with Jamf, and we started talking about, hey, this is how we can do this once we get this rolled out, and it's going to be heavy because we have to touch every machine initially. Once we get that out there, though, the sky's the limit, and it literally was. I mean, it was a complete game changer. We were also talking to Code 42 because we knew about the backup product. One of our bigger issues that we had was people were losing their computers. I've never seen so many people lose a computer. But you know, you give them a really nice MacBook Pro, and they just start to disappear. And when there's no IT and there's no security, they kind of go, oh, hey, I lost my computer. Can I get a new one? But what was really interesting is the business problem there was that the executives thought, I don't want my sales operations team to have to redo work. And I thought, okay, so they don't care about the intellectual property or the data law. They literally don't want them to have to like spend their Wednesday doing what they did on Tuesday and Monday, which blew my mind. But that's really, I mean, when you're trying to run as fast as you can and grow as fast as you can and increase sales, I get it, right? That's kind of what they're looking for. So we ended up deploying Jamf before we deployed Code 42, even though that was the first business issue, because we had to roll out Code 42. And so I thought, well, better way to roll out Code 42 than to roll out Jamf first and then push the package. And so that's kind of how it all got started.
Awesome. No, that's always great to hear. I'm really always kind of fascinated with that kind of story. And I'm just kind of super curious, what was your like favorite thing that has happened or that you've worked on so far at Anaplan? Because you guys have done quite a bit, it sounds like.
Yeah, I'd say my favorite thing was probably, it's the hardest thing we did, and it's also my favorite thing. But we opened 4 offices in the span of 6 weeks. So it's a complete network rebuild, architecture, Singapore, London, Minneapolis, and San Francisco. So those offices seat around 700 people, so it was no small task, but having to get AV into every single office, having to rebuild the network, implement guest policies, everything. It was a full stack environment in each location too, so it was a ton of work, and it literally took the team traveling the globe. I think I had 36 to 48 hours, it's kind of fuzzy now, but hours working straight, because we had to meet a deadline. People were going to be in that office, and it was going to happen. And we'd cut over 2 networks to new WAN providers in other locations, and so I got on a train to London, and I had to stand on the train ride from northern UK down to London, and I hadn't slept for 30 hours, and so I was kind of drifting in and out. But we got there, we got it done, and having that team, the team that was working with us, you know, we were just traveling the world, and it was kind of like all for one for all, and we just had to get it done. It's a great testament to how strong the culture is in our group. Yeah. The fact that we were able to get that done on time without issues, and that was the best part. We opened 4 offices, and there were no questions. I mean, it's like it was amazing. That's the best possible scenario. So it was a fantastic effort by all of our team.
You have end users, and you had no questions.
Hundreds of end users, complete brand new office that they had never stepped in before, and we had no issues. They just walked in, the network worked, they didn't have any questions because the AV was all working. It was awesome.
That's really cool. And I know you mentioned that you do kind of a zero-touch rollout for everybody to support these remote offices, these remote users. Could you talk us a little bit through what that looks like? What are the components of that?
Yeah. We have a lot of people who they could come from traditional IT backgrounds like I do, and so they're used to like things like WDS to image Windows machines, and so they said, oh, we need to create an image. And I was like, no, we're not doing an image. We're going to do thin provisioning, and we're going to push everything down. The beauty of the Mac, I think, is that it comes with the bare minimum. There's no extra stuff on there, right? So I have no problem pushing it out to an end user and then letting it automatically enroll in DEP and VPP and get all the policies and get all the software, but it's super simple. So we just give them the box, they unwrap it, and we let them go. And then all of a sudden they start seeing things pop up on the screen and their apps are showing up, and it's a really beautiful thing. In fact, we even deploy crash plans silently, so they don't actually know that it's even going down until they need to go back up or restore a file. In which case, then we go, oh, it's already backing up your computer. So,
Did we? Sorry, there was a slide that skipped itself here. Okay, which would have shown the nice and simple way that you can actually configure Code 42 to be pushed out by the Jamf service.
yeah,
Basically, we just, as long as we can tie into your SSO, or Active Directory, LDAP, or actually we don't even need either of those, we can just register the local account. But it can definitely, I know for Code 42's side of it, we can definitely deploy silently, roll all that out. Curious if there are any other tools or anything else that you had to work with or work into that stack.
sure. So as we were going through this deployment, and one of the things, let me just take a step back. One of the things about being a global IT shop is you have to think about all those different kind of nuances. So I was very fortunate, reporting to the C-level people, working directly with our attorney, working directly with finance, procurement. I picked up a lot of stuff that I didn't actually know before. So some of the things that came up were like the privacy and the keeping data in country or data residency, things like GDPR is talking about a lot right now. So the beauty that I thought of Code 42 is that even 4 years ago when we signed, you had different geographies. So they had the US, they had the EU, which was in the UK.
Yep.
I think now is there also Amsterdam?
Yeah, we have a Dublin and we have an Amsterdam data centers.
Yep. And then we've got stuff in APAC as well, so Singapore and then Australia. So we have people all over those places, and when we first started talking about it, the de facto, I'm based in the US. Let's have everything backed up here in the United States. But then I thought, if you guys have got these other locations to back up to, let's do that. So based on the script that we wrote, we were able to push the software out to people based on the group membership that they were. So if they're in the UK, they would back up and they would set up themselves in a separate org inside Code 42 platform, and it would back up the data to that location. So the data residency was taken care of automatically. The user had no idea. It was local, so it's going to be faster for restores and everything else too. But it's a really beautiful thing. And with Jamf, we were able to do that silently, defer the password, so they would basically start backing up as soon as crash plan started. So they started going off. They didn't have to log in or SSO. We just tied it right back into Okta in the back end, so it was actually very, very seamless. One of those things that when it worked, once we got it going, it was like, oh, people just forget about it. And even my Mac engineer now, he's like, I don't know how you did that. And I'm like, it just works. It works so well, we haven't had to mess with it. We just upgrade the package in the background when the new version comes out, and it continues to work today.
Awesome. Now, as you've scaled, you've definitely, it sounds like you had to shift quite a bit from the Windows world into the Mac world, and definitely had learned a lot. I'm curious, if you could go back 4 years and do it all again, what advice would you give to yourself or someone who's facing the same kind of challenges of a rapidly growing environment, coming into a place where there may not have been as much management as we all probably would have liked to see?
What would I have done differently? I think I hate to even say work harder. But one of the things I think that probably is very critical is knowing when to ask for help. The techie in me really wants to be hands-on. I'm tenacious. I have to know how it works. The fact that I'm going to let somebody else do some technical work, that's not going to happen, right? But but really, the only way that you can scale quickly and go really fast is to rely on like system integrators and things like that to do some of that work for you. So some of the big migrations that we did, we actually brought in people to do like our 365 migration and to help with our Jamf rollout. The professional services team at Code 42, they came in and helped us with that stuff. But I literally sat over people's shoulders and watched exactly what they were doing, because while I might have done, like I said, dozens and dozens of migrations for customers over the years, I had never done a hosted Exchange 2007 to Office 365. I just had never done that before.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure I could have figured it out, but given the timelines of we need to do this now, pulling in those experts that have done that stuff, and there's a lot of great companies out there that have done this stuff, even smaller shops. You don't have to go to like the giant places, but a lot of those really good small shops have done this stuff hundreds of times, and we really relied on them. They did a lot of fantastic work for us, and that's enabled us to run much faster, right? And then we can actually partner with the business a lot more and get more stuff done, because at the end of the day, the business is what keeps us employed. So we want to make sure that we keep their needs in mind, and we make them happy, right? Because they're our customer.
Awesome. No, that's always great to hear. That's great that there's, some at least advice that you have for going back, and like, at least you're not saying, I wish I'd done everything differently. Sounds like we at least hit most of the nail on the head. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's really all the prepared questions that I had for you. Kind of want to open it up to the room. If anyone has questions for Alan or for myself, I'd love to answer any questions that you guys might have. Yep, we have 2 microphones set up either side of the room, so please step on up.
Hey there, I'm just curious about how you manage redeployment. So often we talk about like onboarding and the super magic of that, but we never talk about kind of the pain of getting that device back, especially for some of us that are in industries where there are rapid turnover just because of the nature, or that you have a lot of contractors coming in at different seasons. So how do you manage that in a global scale of making sure something with a British keyboard doesn't end up back at your US office? Or, and then also how do you go about purchasing or learning about the different rules about purchasing devices in different countries?
Sure. So in physically getting the devices back, the first thing that we do upon termination, whether it's a contractor or an FTE, full-time employee, we lock the device with Jamf. We send a lock code. We will even get oh, hey, I only had 4 more hours. I had 4 more hours of work to do this evening, and my boss said, nope, our policy is this is what we're going to do. And we lock the device, so they make sure that there's no use to them. I've even have old people that have come back and said, hey, I really need to get my data off there, and so we end up having them come back to us, and we get the data off for them. We can always get it back from Code 42 if we have to. But we get the data and we send it back to the end user. And then it's kind of going back to the think globally, but act locally. Our local offices that manage the procurement and the distribution of those devices initially. So my London office takes care of like Russia and basically all of Europe. All the devices come back to them. So they have old devices with Russian keyboards, and we've even looked at like swapping out keyboards and resetting stuff. It's just not worth it. We'd rather have some stuff actually on hand in case stuff breaks. So that's how we get the stuff back. But yeah, we rely on the local offices to do that. And remind me, what was the second part of that? Was the purchasing?
Yeah, it was purchasing, correct?
Yeah, so being that we have a large presence in the US, a large presence in the UK, and then we have a Paris office as well. So we set up agreements with Apple to buy everything through them direct. So we're able to get pretty decent pricing, I think, and use the VPP program so that when we send it out, it doesn't really matter where it goes. The biggest issues we've had have been like going to Japan, trying to purchase a Japanese keyboard from the Japanese Apple store with a US credit card can lead to issues. Okay. So I would say when that stuff's happening, you want to plan as far as you can, and I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek, knowing that oh, hey, we have new hires starting on Monday. Like, great, where are they? We've had to literally do some of that stuff before, but 90% of the time we are able to use Apple's global resources, and we've got a custom Apple store where we can go buy all of our hardware, specified keyboards. I think actually the most configurations that we can get are in the US Apple custom store. So I can order, I think it's almost 20 different languages of keyboards in the US store, and if I have to ship it you're dealing with customs and things like that. But we try to use the local Apple Store in each location that we can. So it's a bit of a challenge, and the more you expand, the harder it gets.
Oh, that's awesome. Do you guys ever have a situation where like employee needs their laptop or something right away, but we've had an event? Are you able to say, hey, you know what, just go to the Apple Store, get something, and get them up and running? Is that?
Yeah, that's absolutely happened. We've had people that it might be a cracked screen or it just won't boot, and we've done everything we can remotely over the phone with them. And so what we've ended up doing is we say, just go to the Apple Store and talk to them, and we set up the appointment through our account. So that it's a corporate appointment, and they've actually been serviced very quickly. I've had people jump the line before, compared to everybody else who just walked in the store, and they're kind of waiting, and then all of a sudden my person comes in and they go right to the front, and they're kind of getting the looks like, hey, well, we're corporate customers, so this has been very useful, and then we can just buy stuff on our account. And so
really?
I'm like, yeah, send them out the door with a new computer. We make sure that they register it in Jamf before they walk out the door, because that's obviously not going to be VPP enrolled.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've had to do that, and it's been very, very useful. And Apple stores everywhere now. It's really very useful.
Awesome. No, that's great. We had a question?
Yeah, hey there. So everybody here is talking about zero-touch deployment, and one of the things that we're facing is onboarding SaaS tools, basically walking people through setting up like MFA and different passwords to different accounts. How does your team handle that?
Yeah, Okta. So we single sign-on through Okta. Okta SAML supports, I don't know, probably 10,000 different apps now. It's probably even more than that. I think the last time I saw it's like over 10,000 apps.
I think that's the pre-built ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and then anything that you don't have that does support SAML, you can build it yourself. So you just go in and you can add an app, and you have to set up all the stuff, and you learn about the IDPs and relays. It's very possible. It's very doable. But we actually do as much provisioning as we can automatically, because that's saved us time. Anywhere I can, I will build it so that it does an automatic a push into that system, and automatic deprovisioning if we take it away. So like if it's Box, it creates an account for them in Box, it puts them in the right group based on what we assign them inside Okta. So all the attributes kind of flow through, they get permissions, all the files that they need, and then at the end of the day when they're done, we have a special service account that when it deprovisions, the application actually pulls it back and then sends it to a separate folder. And that way if the manager then needs some documents that they had later on, we can go back into the service account, move them around. But anything we can do to automate that is definitely doable. And then unfortunately there are some applications that they just don't support provisioning, or they don't support SAML even. Haven't run into as many of those, I think maybe because being in a SaaS company, everyone looks to other SaaS companies. So a lot of those SaaS companies, it's kind of almost like the de facto, it's a standard now, that if they've got Okta, if they are a SaaS company, and they're building a platform, they do SAML with paying Okta.
Yeah. We had another question.
How do you support, or with the limited staff, how do you enforce policies, like encryption, antivirus, unwanted apps? How do you do that on a short staff?
Again, Jamf. So we end up pushing everything out, and then we have the console. We can run reports. We use smart groups if things aren't checking in. So a lot of those attributes where you can do like last check-in, you can even create your own extended attributes. So a couple of them I think I took or I borrowed and I modified from Code 42. I pull in like last backup time, backup percentage. So if it's below 90% or it hasn't backed up in the last, say, 2 weeks, I have a smart group for that, and that gets flagged. And then we take remediation steps for that. Antivirus is the same way. We use Sophos for antivirus, and we push that agent out automatically, and we report on that in the JSS. And then we have smart groups based on people not checking in. And some of those, people go on vacation or holiday for a month, and that happens. But more often than not, the issues that do arise are from the antivirus just stopping checking in or whatever's happening. But yeah. Any type of automated reporting, and then those audits, that comes back in a ticket, and then we have to address those with the team.
Have you seen any issues with during backups with bandwidth? We have users that have 400, 500 gigs of data on their machines, and then in first lunch, and you have 200 users in one office. How does that affect the bandwidth in your network, or how do you scope that out?
Yeah, we usually use the standard backup defaults automatically, and it actually has been very, very, very good. One of the things that we did notice, we looked at a few different products, and the Code42 platform, the amount of like CPU, because that's kind of one of the things that our developers would look at first thing is like, oh, this is taking up a lot of CPU or my network or memory. It's very lightweight, and that's kind of been one of the hallmarks of why we chose it. But we haven't had any issues with the amount of backup bandwidth that it's taking. I do have one user, she's like remote Utah, up in the mountains, and so she's got a slower connection just in general to the internet, and so we created a specific policy for her and ratcheted that down, but we really haven't had any issues. The backup times have been fine, and because we put it on the machine as soon as they roll it out, we're backing up almost nothing to start with, right? We just back up the user profile, so there's nothing in there. If you are doing a rollout though, and someone's got 400 gigs of data, that can be more data intensive. I'd put them on the wire and see if it's going to take time. But the restores actually are much improved too over the years. It used to be you'd send out DVDs if you needed to get a...
That was my first job at Code42.
Yeah.
Was the sending actual physical copies of your backup data to you so
Yeah.
that you could get it a little faster than
Yeah.
pulling over the network.
And our restores now are so fast. I think it's like 10 times.
It's
over 100 megabit on the download. So we actually do, if we have to move somebody over to another machine, we've actually just gone back and said adopt this device and pulls down their data, and it works really well. It's working really well for even device migrations, which I never thought I would say when you're restoring an entire computer over the internet.
Yeah.
But it does work.
So actually, that's part of my question is device migrations. But to answer your question too, the other thing that we do with Code42 is it actually comes back to a networking teams issue, and we actually file that as a scavenger class. So regardless of what their network traffic is, that's always put as the lowest tier. At least that works for us. So then we never have to worry about it with constrained bandwidths across whatever our offices are. Mm-hmm. So that's an easy way to manage it and not have to fiddle around in Code42. But back to what you're talking about for migrations, are your migrations basically end user driven then? So when you're doing an actual refresh of a machine, is the end user going in and snagging all of their data and migrating that back, or is that something that's being driven by IT before they get the machine? How does that process look for you guys? And also, what are you guys including or excluding in that migration stuff? Because obviously you want to back up things like application data or the library, but if you restore that data, that's potentially catastrophic. But you have to back it up in case they have like a PST in Outlook and terrible things like that.
Yeah. So we end up backing up the entire user profile, and but the IT staff is actually doing that backup for them. So they'll get the new computer, and we'll get them logged in for the first time, or we'll log into it, and then we'll have them come over, and we'll have them authenticate to Okta, and then opens up Code42, and then they can restore that data. So they start the restore, and then the user comes over and gets it once it's done. But yeah, to your point, you have to be kind of selective on what you actually pull back. But for the most part, we back up the entire user profile.
Gotcha. I was really hoping the answer is Jamf. We've made a button in self-service to restore all their data.
If I did, I would share the code.
It's actually kind of funny because as you talk, that's like the same exact situation that I'm currently in, like how you described where you were. So it's very interesting to me hearing you say a lot of these things, like you show up and, I came and I think there was like a Netgear router or something, and it's not a small company, and I'm like, oh, you don't even have firewalls, this is fun. And so I've been building a lot of that. And so with that in mind, what was the biggest mistake you made? And what is your advice that I don't make that mistake?
Yeah, so I think I'm not going to name the vendor, but sure. I chose a vendor to do something, and I still have them in place today. We are slowly getting off that vendor, but making those decisions, those tough decisions, those hard decisions, make them faster.
Yeah.
It's kind of the sunk cost fallacy, like, oh, we've already done it, all those machines are already in that, it works.
Yeah.
It works, and then taking years to get off of that, it will save you time to spend the headache and spend the time right now. It will save you time over the next 2-3 years.
Yeah.
That is that extra management that you don't want to be doing, and is taking away from other more important projects. So
fail faster.
Exactly. Yeah, fail faster and make your decisions quickly. It's kind of like the cut bait mentality. It's like, it's not working, next thing. And even though we'd already deployed it and it was running, I still wish I had pulled the trigger on that faster.
Because it's still resonating to this day.
Yeah.
Good enough.
And it makes the projects to replace them harder down the road. Because even though it's a trickle, it's getting bigger and bigger every year. Now to do that migration and get people off of that other platform is actually a lot harder than it was before. We've had to take extraordinary steps in building out a whole new infrastructure to support them that we wouldn't have had to do a couple of years ago.
So you mentioned you have 20 sites around the world, and that you engage with your network resources to make sure that they're adequately bandwidth. Do you have any locations where adequate bandwidth is not available? And how do you decide in those locations when they get their own local DP, if they get a local DP?
Okay. Most of our offices are in large business areas, so London, Mumbai, Chicago, New York. I don't have any issue procuring bandwidth, so that's never been an issue. Typically for the local depot, we're about 20 to 25 users. It still works because we're on Jamf Cloud, pulling stuff down. They're using AWS and they're using the caching services, so we really don't have very many issues. But I would say when you get to 25, maybe 50, at that point you want to start looking at having a local depot on site and then doing your networks and your buildings and things like that to make sure that you provide a good experience to the users. Otherwise, it can take a long time. Great.
Yeah. No, that's, I think if we don't have any other questions, I think that's all that we had for everyone today. But both Alan and I are going to be hanging out down at the Code 42 lounge booth downstairs in the expo hall through the lunch hour. So if any other questions come up, you want to discuss some of the solutions that we're putting together, or just like want to come and chat, that's where we'll be. So come down, stop by, say hi.
Thank you.